Okay, so we're going to get started. So welcome everyone to Lowe Connects, Allison Zuckerman Research and Practice and Conversation with Mira Rubell. I'm Jody Seifer. I'm the Curator of Education at the Lowe Art Museum, and I'm delighted to welcome you to this virtual program. I would really like to thank both Allison Zuckerman and Mrs. Mira Rubell for being here and participating in this virtual program. Very excited. I would also like to thank Dr. Jill Dupuy, the Director and Chief Curator of the museum, as well as all of the Lowe staff, including Gina Ballariso and Emily Loudermilk, Bridget O'Brien, Mark Osterman, and everyone else, the team at the Lowe for putting this program together. So I would like to also thank the Rubell Museum and Mrs. Rubell for being here, and for the whole team at the Rubell for participating in this event, and want to make sure everyone is aware that the Rubell is opened and they have extended hours on Friday and Saturday until 7:30, and please visit. And you can also visit their fabulous restaurant. You can dine inside and outside, so you can see the hours, open till 11 for dinner. So please visit them at the Rubell. I would like you to know to save the date for our next Lowe Connects. It's January 14th, 2021. It's hard to say that already, but we're excited to welcome Virgil Ortiz, an Indigenous futurist, a Native American artist and innovator, as well as Monica Buckel, a curator and consultant, who will have a conversation about Virgil's work. So please join us for that. You can visit our website, lowe.miami.edu, to find all the events and links on the calendar on the bottom. So we hope that you will join us for that. I also want to make sure everyone is aware that this beautiful piece, The Queen by Allison Zuckerman, on loan from the Rubell Museum, is part of our exhibition Nexus, Contemporary Art from Leading Miami Collections. And you can visit a mobile version or an online version of that exhibition on the Lowe's website as well. So we hope that you will take advantage and do that. So I'm going to, in a moment, pass the mic to Dr. Jill Dupuy, who will introduce both Allison and Mrs. Rubell. And please, during the presentation, you can type in your questions in the Q&A section. And we will try to get to them at the end. Allison and Mrs. Rubell will answer them as they can, as time allows at the end. And when you sign off, a very short 5-question survey will appear. And we really appreciate it if you take a few minutes to fill it out for us. And so now I will pass the microphone over to Dr. Jill Dupuy.
Thank you, Jody. And I would like to just echo Jody's words of thanks to the whole Lowe team, who has worked so hard on all of our Lowe Connects, including this evening, as well as Jody herself, who's the glue that holds these events together, as well as thanking all of you for joining us, sharing your Friday evening with us tonight. It's nice to see so many familiar names as you're logging in through the participant link. So welcome, and we're delighted you're here. And of course, thank you to Mira and to Allison for being with us this evening. We're delighted that you're here, and we really are all looking forward to hearing what you have to say, Allison, as well as your conversation with Mira. I want to give you as much time as possible so that you both can chat, but did want to first just offer a few words of introduction for you both. If I may, starting with you, Allison. Since her breakthrough exhibition, Stranger in Paradise, at the Rubell Family Collection in 2017, Allison Zuckerman has continued to gain critical acclaim around the globe. Armed with a deep knowledge of art history, as well as a keen understanding of pop culture, Zuckerman painstakingly creates collages that fuse painting and digital printing techniques and elide two worlds, the old and the new. As she explains, quote, "Painting is still at the core of my artistic practice, but working digitally allows me to shorten the distance between thought and expression," end quote. Mira Rubell is known to many of you, I'm sure. Mira and her husband, Don, first began engaging with artists, galleries, and museums in 1964 while living in New York. Upon moving to Miami in 1992, they helped spearhead the transformation of South Beach, turned Wynwood, home to their first exhibition space, the Rubell Family Collection, into a cultural destination, and were instrumental in bringing Art Basel to Miami Beach. The Rubell's early interactions with and support of artists has grown into a lifelong, life-defining passion, and to this day, they both remain intimately involved with all curatorial and operational aspects of their beautiful new space in Alapata, the Rubell Museum. And I do just want to wax poetic about both the space and the restaurant and Mira. I had the great pleasure of being there a few weeks ago, and I was so impressed to see Mira stopping everything to greet every child and every person who came through the door to make sure that they felt so welcome in her family's museum. It was really very affirming in terms of the work that happens in museums, but also spoke volumes about Mira's commitment and passion for what she does. Their work at the museum it's really everything, including creating exhibitions, working directly with artists, engaging with the public, as I just indicated, and collaborating with museums worldwide. The Rubell's art collection, one of the finest in the world, includes works by artists such as Jean-Michel Basquiat, Keith Haring, Jeff Koons, Yayoi Kusama, whose beautiful Narcissus Garden I encourage you all to go see, Cindy Sherman, Kara Walker, and Purvis Young. Beyond collecting and exhibiting well-established artists, the Rubells also actively support and elevate emerging artists working at the forefront of contemporary art, including, of course, Allison Zuckerman. So without further ado, Allison, the floor is yours. Welcome and thank you again.
Hi, everybody. Thank you, Jill, so much for that lovely introduction. Just going to echo Jill and thank everyone again for being here. We are having our own kind of Miami Art Basel from afar. So my name is Allison Zuckerman, and I am going to start off the slideshow with some images of paintings that I made during undergraduate at the University of Pennsylvania. I began referencing art history in my work during graduate school, but in college I focused on refining my technical painting skills and made tightly rendered close-up paintings of fellow students, myself, and friends. I attended the School of the Art Institute of Chicago for graduate school with a concentration in painting. There, I wanted to challenge myself to understand the relationship of painting to photography. Phones, the internet, and social media were really taking off, and my day-to-day life was very much involved with a computer or phone screen. I had an interest in photography and would stage photo shoots in my studio or outdoors. Instead of choosing a single medium of painting or photography, I decided to reconcile the two and combine them through collage. I'd photograph my paintings and use those photos in the work, as well as photographs I'd taken, and I'd also use paint. During graduate school, with direct access to the incredible collection at the Art Institute of Chicago, I was able to examine art history and found more and more that women have been such a focus of artists in Western art history, but rarely ever the makers. And the women were nude and powerless. I couldn't ignore my frustration, and these feelings made their way into my work. This is William Buguero, painted in 1894. This figure appears in this painting in the center behind the horse. I began taking art historical compositions and repurposing them, and I wanted to make my nude women active. I found that many of these art historical women are usually submissive, laying on their sides, but I chose to make these women running, and they are showing emotion. I wanted them to be forces to contend with, not just pretty women to ogle. In the center figure, a painting I had made of Adam and Eve makes up the left side of her torso, while a Renoir bathing figure emerges from her pelvis. Towards the end of grad school, I started creating life-size collage pieces that acted as extensions to the paintings. They were made out of cardboard and occupied the viewer's space. To me, the paintings started becoming scenes and sets that one could weave their way through. And on the last day of school, I took one of these sculptures into Millennium Park, set it up, and watched from afar as people began to congregate around it and inspect it. Soon a crowd formed, and people were lining up to take pictures with this uncanny object. I found it delightful. I was there for close to 3 hours, and I actually had to walk away with the sculpture as people were still trying to take pictures with it. I was invited to show my work at the G.L. Strand Museum in Copenhagen after graduating from the School of the Art Institute of Chicago in 2015. And so I moved home and spent the summer preparing work for the show. I transitioned the sculptures from cardboard to aluminum that were as thick as an iPhone and one-sided to reference screen technology and flatness, and filled my allotted space with paintings. I wanted to create a feeling of image inundation, similar to the feeling I get from using Instagram and the internet. After the show, I began fusing comic book styled women with art history. This painting uses a body from Modigliani and a face from a comic book page. This painting is from 1917 and is titled Nude Sitting. So much of the comic books geared towards female audiences is about women facing unrequited love, while the comics directed at boys were about superheroes. This is by Roy Lichtenstein, painted in 1972, entitled Still Life with Goldfish. And this is by Matisse, who Lichtenstein was referencing, and it is from 1935. This is also from Matisse, Pink Nude. I was interested in what the pop artists did of the 50s and 60s in terms of fusing the low of every day with the high of fine art. This is Lichtenstein, Woman in Bath, 1963. I moved to New York in April of 2016 and got a job right away at a gallery in Soho as an administrative assistant and devoted a portion of my apartment to my studio. The job was full-time, so I'd wake up early to paint and paint when I'd get home at night. I was posting to Instagram daily, figuring that it was the most efficient way to get my work out into the world and that Instagram was the future. One day in December, I received a message from Kravitz Wavy Gallery that they wanted to come see my work in person, and they invited me to be in a group show that was opening in a month. No joke, this was how my apartment was set up most of the time. While the show was on view, I stopped into the gallery to have lunch with the owners, Mark Waby and Susie Kravitz. On my way out, I passed two collectors on the way in. After walking a few blocks to the subway, I received a call from the gallery asking me to come back to speak with the collectors. 2 hours later, Mira and Don Rubell were in my studio. After the impromptu visit, I said to myself, well, I guess this is what the best day of my life feels like. Soon after the opening of the group show, Kravitz Wavy offered me a solo show that would open in April. So I decided to quit the gallery job on International Women's Day and took the plunge in committing myself full-time to make work for my show. I became particularly interested in appropriating Picasso's work because he treated the women in his life so ruthlessly. I was striving to give them an alternative life in my world. Shortly before this show called Act Natural opened, I curated a show of 5 artists, Shona McAndrew, Haley Josephs, Danny Farrell, Sophia Narrett, and myself, that opened at the Spring Break Art Fair during Armory Week. I had come into contact with all of these artists' work through Instagram and fell in love with their work on the platform. I approached the curation in a similar way to how I presented my work, as an immersive, maximal experience. Mira and Don Rubell invited me to be the artist in residence at the Rubell Museum, a private collection of contemporary art in Miami for the summer. I moved to Miami and decided that I wanted to take advantage of the space, which was 1,500 square foot museum gallery, because I had been working in about 100 square feet of space in my apartment. The staff was so helpful and accommodating and gave me access to a scissor lift so I could realize this goal. At night, I would spend a few hours in the Rubell Collection's extensive library. For this painting, I was mainly referencing Picasso's Portrait of a Woman after Cranach. However, I didn't know the title, and it wasn't until I was flipping through a book of German Renaissance paintings that I saw this, Portrait of a Lady by Lucas Cranach the Younger, painted in 1564. I was elated to join this art historical lineage unintentionally. This was the opening night of the show, Stranger in Paradise, during Art Basel in 2017. After the residency, I came back to New York and found a studio in Bushwick. Because I use digital techniques within my work, I thought about the pixel as a mark, much in the way a painted stroke could be refined, rough, thick, or thin. The pixel can also be a kind of painterly gesture. Bringing pixelation into my work was transformative. This was the first painting I made using pixelation. I spent most of 2018 working on a show that opened at the Akron Art Museum, curated by Ellen Rudolph, called Pirate and Muse. I consider myself a kind of pirate in that I am moving from one art historical territory to another, taking, stealing, and repurposing, creating a kind of pirated material. I am also representing the art historical muse and then musing upon that action. It's a video of the installation. It helps get a sense of the sculptures in the space. Here are a few shots from the show. I used my sculptures in this show and felt that if the paintings were bricks, the sculptures acted as a kind of mortar. After the Akron show opened, I began working on 2 museum shows that opened in the fall of 2019. One at the Herzliya Museum in Israel, curated by the art historian Tammy Katz-Freeman, called To Create from a Cloud, and at the University of Florida in Gainesville, called Vitruvian Women, in honor of the 500th year anniversary of the death of Leonardo da Vinci. This is Herzliya. Here's an example of a diagram that I make to illustrate the references used within the paintings. I use my references like in text citations. I am not pretending to create these moments. Rather, they are quotes. I think of these paintings as visual sampling, similar to the construction of some kinds of hip hop music. This was the first show that we painted the walls, so I thought that brought the work together too. This is Vitruvian Women in Florida. I was a visiting artist in residence for a few weeks in Gainesville and had the pleasure of working with both the undergrads and grad students. This is based on the School of Athens. During the summer of 2019, I worked with the champagne label Veuve Clicquot and the advertising firm Colossal Media to create a mural to honor Brooklyn. 5 murals were created, each representing a borough of New York, and were all designed by women artists. The founder of Veuve Clicquot was a widowed woman, and the project was inspired by her impressive grit and determination in making champagne the popular beverage that it is today. The mural was hand-painted by Colossal Media. In October, I returned to Miami to work on a commissioned mural by the Rubells to be hung permanently in the restaurant of their new museum. At 25 feet wide, it is the widest painting I have made to date. The painting is a reference to the birth of Adam, and to me exemplifies the ongoing support of artists and acquisition of work that the Rubells do. This past January, I opened my solo show Paper Doll at Kravitz Waby. These paintings were made from a collaboration with Louis Vuitton and Vogue Italia, wearing the Louis Vuitton clothing. And with the onset of COVID, I began to strip away my paintings using sanding and drawing techniques, applying more physicality to the paintings. In a way, I felt like I was taking their makeup off, making them more raw and in a way vulnerable. Studio shot. I was asked by the musician Charlie XCX to create an album cover for a single she released over the summer. And I've really enjoyed these collaborations. To me, they feel like portraits in that I'm studying the collaborator and conveying their essence while imbuing them with my artistic sensibilities. My latest project was Vortex, a curated group show of 13 artists, which opened at Kravitz-Waby Gallery this October. The ongoing collective survival of our human spirit and our steady emergence as a solid yet weathered community throughout this past year inspired the development of Vortex. We have been uprooted and dislocated, but remain resilient. Our differences are our strengths and bind us together. Each of these 13 artists, using the body as subject, presents their experience of living in the United States in 2020. So we have, from the left, we have Shona McAndrew, Taha Haydari, Kate Klingbeil, David Henry Jr., Jeremy Scott, Abdi Farah, Chris Regner, Danny Farrell, Daniel Orchard, Mark Gibson, and The Raft is by Adam Parker Smith. This was my painting in the show. This painting is currently on view at Kravitz-Waby as part of the Untitled Art Fair booth. I wanted to incorporate a video of the painting so you could see the rhinestones that are on it and the way that they interact with the light. It's a new technique I've been incorporating into the work, and I think of it as elevating craft into the realm of high fine art. We released this edition yesterday. It's a 4-piece dinnerware collection in collaboration with Maria Rubell and Showfields. They are porcelain and made in the US. And the Rubell Museum is selling 3 30 by 40-inch prints on stretched canvas from the Paper Doll exhibition and a sculpture. And I have a print edition launching next week with the City Harvest charity. So I think we can now open it up to a conversation with Mira.
Hi, Allison. Wow. So I thought, thank you. I really thank you for this invitation. I enjoyed your presentation. You know, I thought that would be kind of cool for us to share with the audience my personal experience living inside of an artist studio, because actually in 50 years of collecting, I never did that, except, I mean, of course I live with my daughter who's an artist, but actually I've never being, as it turned out, you were, during the summer, you were with us in the summertime, and we give over our apartment to the artist in residence, which you lived in, right behind the collection when we were still in Wynwood. That was in 2017. And so normally, sometimes there's an overlap of a few days where we come back a little earlier and we spend a little bit of time with the artist and the work. But in this case, because my daughter-in-law lost her father, we had to come back early. And so I offered you to move into a hotel, and you said, well, if you don't mind, I said, of course we don't mind. We thought you would mind, but if you remember, we decided to cohabitat. And so we literally lived together in the space while you were creating your work. And I have to say, I'm curious, I know what impact it had on me, but I'm also curious, what was your impression living and working and inside of a collector's home and universe? Because it wasn't just that we were meeting, you know, just passing through each other. We came down the stairs each morning, had breakfast together, would then proceed to have an hour or two of art conversation. Then Don would engage. I mean, the three of us engaged so intimately with your work and the way you let us into your work. I often thought, well, it was very generous of you, but I'm wondering, so do tell, what was it like living with us? What was it like being like in our living, eating, you know, sleeping experience with each other?
Well, it was art 24/7. So in the morning when I would come down, you would ask me, what books were you looking at last night? And I remember I had been looking at a Ferdinand Leger, and you asked me, have you ever used him in your work? And I said, no. And at that time, we decided that we were going to extend the residency for a few more weeks. So what better opportunity to use Leger in my work than now? And and then I made the largest painting yet with Leger as the main focus.
You know, it's so fun.
So that was.
I actually thought you were. What happened? I have to confess that I started dreaming about all the artists that you were presenting. You were constantly doing this. What we discovered living with you is that you are an extraordinary historian. I mean, the amount of research you do. Don would try and beat you to an artist you didn't know. I mean, you know, within this entire library, actually, I can't say that I have to confess, I haven't read all these books, but I think Don has. Don is always in the library studying. And I remember he would come down the stairs, come to the dinner, to the breakfast table, ready to challenge you with an artist that you never heard of. And sure enough, sometimes coincidentally, it was an artist you were thinking about because you constantly are engaged in how history, history and art come together in your work. It was really, we were just astonished how much history you know. So when were you always interested? Because not all artists know history. A lot of artists don't actually study history, but you have a keen interest, almost as like a historian, and then you figure out how to, shall we say, appropriate, how to plagiarize, how to Picasso said borrow is one thing, but steal, you know, great artists steal. In that case, you might be considered a great artist. So tell me, when did you become so interested in history? Were you always a history buff?
I studied art history at Penn, but at the School of the Art Institute of Chicago, where the school is actually a part of the physical museum, that's when the interest really spiked. And I would walk through the museum every single day to get to class. So it was wonderful. And that's when I started realizing that there was kind of an unequal balance of women as subject, but not as maker. And that was very, very inspiring to me because it was upsetting to me. And I think that's what fueled so much of the making. And using art history in the work and using only male artists in the work, to me, is kind of like
basically you're only stealing from male artists. So so are you, what does it mean that you're also taking male figures, converting them to female figures, like the creation figures, God and man coming together, and now two women coming together, especially in the piece behind you in our the beautiful 26-foot painting that you made for the Le Coup restaurant in our museum. You have God and man, both women.
Mm-hmm. Right. Yeah, it's about the fluidity of gender and gender as a performance, and that these paintings are actually dressing up in art history. The collage is like a costuming, it's like a drag, and there's so much spectacle involved in it. And you know, identity is not fixed, and we can modify and retell a different kind of history. So that's what I'm aiming to do, is make these paintings that empower women, actually, and give them agency.
So is this like political? I mean, do you feel like women, that you can give women this kind of, does it translate into society? Do you feel like will affect the way women think about themselves, empower women, change men's attitudes? Is there some conscious effort to change the world?
Well, I think, you know, we agree that the personal is political, and I want these women to be beautiful in a way that is intimidating. And instead of the viewer looking at these paintings and looking at these women and visually consuming them, the women in the paintings actually consume the viewer. And that really I think that was really emphasized during the residency because I could work on such a grand scale. So the women were huge. They were 15 feet tall. So you couldn't really help but be a little intimidated and step back from them. But inviting at the same time, I think I want to depict them in a vulnerable way and make them individuals. So they have flaws, they're not perfect, but they're open and they're proud to be depicted. They're not hiding themselves.
You brought so much physicality to actually making these paintings, because not only did you have to use these lifts to get to work across the length and height of the painting, but there was a lot of physical work. And of course sometimes you work through the night. But tell me, sometimes I felt like when we talked about these artists, because sometimes I would dream about the art conversations, historical art paintings and artists that we talked about. And you were so generous in actually then all of a sudden incorporating these artists immediately into the work. And first you do it digitally, and then the next thing, at first you play around with all these images and figure out how, and then you throw in an image from, a Mickey Mouse image or a Google image, or suddenly there's a Richard Prince, and suddenly there's a Jeff Koons. Walking around our collection and seeing the Jeff Koons and seeing the Richard Prince and seeing the Keith Harings, did that play I know the conversations we had at breakfast and at dinner and then late into the night, and then we bring books from the library. We felt like we were like inside of, so intimately inside of your practice. How did you, do you engage with other people? It was such an intimate engagement. Did it ever, confess now or always forever hold your peace? Did you find it intrusive? For a collector to be so intimately, in some ways I felt a little bit of influencing your work. That's not to say we were telling you what to do, but our conversations all of a sudden resulted, the very conversation resulted in affecting the paintings. So I'm just curious, thinking back to 2017, having a collector in your face like that, what was the experience,
I think, of course, it was influential, but I think of my work as a collaboration, and I'm collaborating with art history. And it's kind of like an open source wiki where I'm borrowing, and it's very obvious where the sources are coming from. So to have our conversations infiltrate the paintings makes sense to my work. It's not a...
And then, of course, you walk the museum constantly, and
right.
We're also getting all this feedback.
Of course.
Yeah.
And, looking at Cindy Sherman, and her work is very performative, and she dresses up in art history through photography. And I think of my paintings as dressing up through art history as painting. And Richard Prince, I love Richard Prince, and if he can appropriate, then I thought, well, why can't I? And why is this not being tapped?
Well, I guess the real I guess it's acceptable when you take that material and personalize it and add a dimension that has never been added before. It becomes an original of a copy. And of course, a lot of the people that you're copying are also copiers. You're really stealing from forgers, so to speak. Prince appropriates, who doesn't? Picasso appropriated. Think of Picasso and all the art of Africa that he quotes appropriated. Mm-hmm. I just want to thank you for that experience, because it was only recently, like in the last 10 years, I'd never drawn, I never made sculpture or painting, and I started taking painting and sculpture classes once a year at the Anderson Ranch in Aspen. And I thought, wow, that really brought me intimately. I thought to myself, maybe collectors should not even be allowed to own a painting until they've made an attempt to make a painting, to understand what that's about, the miracle of actually creating something. And I really thought, wow, after spending this time with you, I thought, well, maybe collectors need to really have this, if they're privileged as we were, to really live inside of a studio, to understand the total engagement. And I remember asking you a question. I said, you know, this is an unusual residency. Like we're living together, eating together, talking endlessly together, late into the night. And this went on for several weeks. I remember asking you this question, which has really affected our program. I said, Allison, like you have, the collector, the artist, would it be more interesting for you if there was another artist around to share your residency, so you can, like, one professional speaking to another professional, whereas you have the collector engaging so intimately with you? And I remember what you said. You said, oh no, Joan, should this change our residency? You said, oh, I wouldn't do that. I wouldn't bring anybody in. I want to be being the only artist together with you, living in this. Of course, no other artist has ever, except for our daughter who's an artist, our daughter Jennifer. We've never actually lived, literally lived with an artist. And therefore, actually, we were living in your studio. I mean, our museum space was just next door, that had that secret door through the library. So you had to go from our living space through the library, through the work gallery where you were working. And you know, these residencies and watching you, it's always so much magic, because the artists you arrived with, I mean, did you send us, usually we buy the canvas. I think we probably bought the canvases, and you have these empty canvases, and all of a sudden, with every day, the people working in the museum are so engaged with what it means to create. It's like, it's a miracle. So they experienced you in the actual gallery that you were working, and we were experiencing you in this intimate space of talking art while eating, talking art while, you know, just hanging out in our living room, kitchen. Yeah, it was 24 hours art. And so anyway, your answer was, no, I don't want to share it. I don't want to share this experience with anybody. And I don't think anybody else would. I don't know that other artists feel this way. I think a lot of artists probably look forward to having one professional artist and another with them. But you said, no, I kind of like this. It was great for us. It really meant a lot. And I don't know if I'll ever have the privilege of being inside of the brain and life experience of an artist like we had with you. Mm-hmm. So, and what did you learn about collectors? Any thing that we should improve on?
I wouldn't say anything to improve on, just that you were always on the move, and you were not slowing down at all. And when there was really no longer than a few weeks that you would stay at home before you would be off to go to another fair or discover another artist. And that was really amazing. You know, you're a kind of explorer too, going into uncharted territory and trying to piece together an artist's narrative, and it's just very, very adventurous and generous what you do, and you would be excited to share some new findings. So I think it's a kind of I think being a collector is being like an artist as well.
Well, I thought it was very, very sweet of you. You were just at the museum last week, having a lovely, you know, you brought your family, and we had a lovely luncheon together. And you looked at this mural that's right behind you, and you said, I want to extend that mural. And I thought, oh, wow, that would be fun for Allison to come back, and maybe for us to have another, session. 24-hour sessions talking about how you would go about creating 2 additional panels to this ongoing narrative on this 26-foot mural. Have you had much thoughts about that?
I have, and you know, the mural, I want it to be expansive and growing, just like your collection is. So I think it makes sense to create additions onto it. And who knows, maybe every year there can be another panel that's added, and it could just extend around the restaurant.
Well, when people are in the restaurant, what they do love to do is really, all of a sudden they start identifying, oh, that looks familiar. Wait a minute, did I see that in Guernica? Did I see this in Matisse? Did I see this in Van Gogh? Isn't this Picasso? Isn't this Matisse? It becomes a puzzle to decipher. And this painting, I was thinking that we should probably create some kind of placemats of some kind where people can have fun with numbers, figuring out who's who and what's what, because people really love to bring the knowledge that they have to your work. It feels very familiar because there's so many characters that are famous historical characters, and people really, especially children, they love it. They love to say, oh my God, isn't this, so we all love to discover mysteries in paintings. And if you're a history buff, your paintings are so much fun to decipher. But you don't look like a serious historian. You're like this attractive young woman, and you don't look like a feminist revolutionary, but you are so committed to your cause. I mean, you have a mission. You have a mission to redefine women in art. That's a big mission, and you're trying to empower us. You're trying to empower all women, and we're living in a moment where empowerment is definitely something that we need to do in order to make the world a better place. I want to thank you so much for being able to spend this intimate time in your head, in your studio. Even if it was my home, you really converted it to your studio. And I really felt like, wow, it was really special.
Thank you. And I think the work really developed and came a long way because of the residency. And I still think back to it all the time, and everything that I've learned, and continuing to apply it to every subsequent painting that I make. I remember I was having some trouble resolving a painting, and I felt like the bottom was kind of falling out. And you said to me, why not a black and white floor? And then that was a game changer, and continued influencing my work. I still incorporate it, and it really is a wonderful pictorial technique that grounds the work and adds so much dimension and perspective and depth.
It's interesting. We talk about the Leger influence. The person who really made me fall in love again with Leger was actually Keith Haring. He loved Leger, loved Leger. In fact, his dream was to own a Leger sometime in his life. And as it turned out, upon his deathbed, really, he said to Don, when I die, I'm going to take this Leger with me. So when somehow Leger came up and you integrated that Leger into your work, it's like hearing a familiar tune of music. This, when musicians are able to, glean from history or historical music, and suddenly they're familiar tones that you hear, but they get recontextualized, like, thinking about, just the way in which you are able to mix and process and reimagine the color values. It all becomes so original to you. And of course, let's not underestimate your skill with computers. That impressed me. Oh my God. Where did you, because I saw how much skill it took for you to manage all this work digitally. Can you talk a little bit about how and where you became aware that gaining that kind of ability on the computer could help your artwork?
So I did take a graphic design class in college, but I was working primarily with physical pieces of collage in graduate school, so cutting and pasting. but the paper would sometimes bubble or fold, peel up in a way that I felt wasn't serving the image. I found it distracting. Also, the paper would fade if it was in direct sunlight. So I realized that I could actually embed the imagery into the canvas by printing onto canvas. And that became an underpainting, because it would be like laying the bones of the painting down, and then I would paint on top of it. And that really brought the whole thing together. If I were to just print on the canvas, it appears very cold and kind of dead. But the painting imbues it with warmth. It's like giving it a blood infusion. It's applying the human element to technology, which I think is cold. And that's also where we are today with technology. We have phones, we have computers, but we are the ones using them. They're not running themselves. They augment our everyday. And that's how technology played a part in my work. Like how do artists, how do painters compete with digital media and social media, which inundates us with imagery? Painting is such a slow process, and how do we compete with it, but also collaborate with it as well and speak to the moment?
You know, the big invention for painting probably was the camera.
Right.
You know, to take that photograph and then paint it and not depend on that still sitter for that portrait. But are you upgrade? I mean, the way you use the computer, I mean, that's what did you? It's interesting that you have such facility with it. I mean, I was just amazed how much you can collage and how much you can incorporate and how you can change. And then the way you incorporate even paintings that you've made into so the digital becomes your painting, the painting becomes your digital. And then, and so did you, are artists, are there any artists out there that are influencing this kind of, is this something that you will continue doing or?
So I was mostly just a painter in undergrad. And when I would start out making the paintings, I pretty much knew how they would turn out. So at the beginning of the slideshow, I showed the close-up cropped paintings. And I knew that the paintings would be a painting of eyes, painting of a foot, but collage makes everything change. I have no idea what a collage is going to turn into. So that's very exciting for me. I think just for me, I found that painting was kind of only painting one source was a dead end, but collage just opened up a world of possibility. Yes, I think I'm always going to continue to do that because I think the world is a collage. Everything we look out into is a collage.
But it's hard to believe. I mean, I was amazed how much work went into the actual composition on the computer before you even, you know, printed it and then started painting it.
Yeah, the compositions take a very long time.
Yeah.
They're actually the most challenging aspect because they very easily fall apart. And like just one subtle move can put the whole thing off balance. And even if I change it back, it really doesn't make a difference. Like the whole thing collapses. But that's where I want my paintings to actually be, is on like teetering on that edge of falling apart, but coming together at the same time.
I also was amazed at how much painting you actually do once you print the canvas, how much painting goes into and how the compositions and the colors and everything comes alive when you actually bring the brush stroke onto the canvas, onto this digital image that you've printed on the canvas. And and then sometimes you just, you're not limited by the structure of the printing. The painting takes on its own life. And so then you go from being this digital organization to being this crazy painter, you know, like you just go wild.
Yeah. You can, and with the painting, I'll take things out, I'll put things in, I'll change different colors, I'll paint in another figure, I'll block something out. The painting really does change what the original composition was. And then I'll photograph the painting and then bring those files into Photoshop and start manipulating those, and that will inform the next work. So
I was also, I was also surprised to see how many little paintings you have that are actual, like, classic canvases that you've labored to paint from scratch, all painted, and then somehow they appear, all of a sudden you start appropriating yourself, which is kind of cool. So you like your crazy toes, or your crazy eyes, or your beautiful big lips, like, and then you exaggerate them. So wow. Did we want to ask, are there some questions from the public too, or I don't know how we're doing on time?
So we have a Q&A section, actually, and there are some questions that I see. So here we go. Andrew Norris says, I am a grad student at UF and I show in a small gallery during Art Basel. Do you have any advice for MFA grads on how to transition to a more prominent gallery? So how would you answer that?
You're asking me?
Mm-hmm.
I don't know what that means for a more significant gallery. I don't know. I would question the relationship you have with the present gallery. What don't, I don't, I mean, you have, it's hard to say. I think if you're in a gallery, what can that gallery do for you? Maybe you need to sit down and have a real conversation about what they need from you and what you need from them. I don't know whether, I don't know, maybe they're not giving you a time for a show, or they're not giving you resources that you need, so I think first start with where you are and go from there. And I think that, of course, always my advice is just make great work, the best work you can possibly make. Sometimes artists are so involved in the politics of their career that they forget that what gets them to where they need to go is just making great work.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Yeah.
And of course, relationships are so important. You can, I mean, to what, relationships are also very important. And in your case, your ability to promote yourself on the internet has really helped you tremendously. Maybe that's an interesting question to ask. How do you make yourself more visible on the internet? And hopefully, you can be, discovered by different, but the important thing is to make great work, to really focus on your, on the work that you're making.
Right. I agree. Above all, it's about the work. But pre-COVID, I remember getting the advice to go to as many openings as possible and attend lectures. And as you said, like, make connections and meet people. So maybe when things become a little bit more normal again, that is something that this artist could do, and just more face-to-face interactions. Julian says, your work tends to recontextualize female figures depicted by male artists. Have you ever considered working with female figures as depicted by female artists like Cindy Sherman? I love Cindy Sherman and I love so many female artists, but right now I'm trying to take these women back from a position of submission that I felt they've been placed in. So right now the focus is going to be on male artists. And to me, we're using these paintings from male artists is like inviting these artists to the party, but roasting them. So they're being honored, but I'm also critiquing them. Bonnie asks, are some of the faces self-portraits? Yes.
Yes. Especially, and I thought, wow, those ugly toes could not possibly belong to you, Allison, right? And you said, oh no, take a look at my toes. I really do have ugly toes.
Yeah.
They weren't quite as ugly as you painted them. But yeah, there are, it's interesting. There's a lot of vulnerability in self-portraiture and you're self-revealing. These paintings have a lot of you in them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
it's like self-deprecating humor, like similar
Yes.
to a comedian. So, but also becoming connected through that.
I like the way you always leave your eyes. Your eyes are always present in these paintings. So if you, even if the figure, every part of the figure has been borrowed from Picasso to Liechtenstein to Van Gogh, and then you look into those eyes, and they're your eyes. It's what is it about your eyes that you feel like is it like about personalizing the painting and connecting?
Yeah, I think like eyes, hands, noses, lips, ears, these are all so unique to the person. And what I found in the paintings that I was critiquing was that there weren't very many personal aspects to the models, but this makes it personal, this makes it my own. So it is like really taking others' work, but making it mine.
I have to say, anyone who enjoys going to classical museums really loves deciphering your paintings. I remember spending some time with with the director of the Albertina, who came to visit us while your paintings were up, and he just loved deciphering your paintings, loved it. He said, "Oh yes, I see." You know, of course, there are artists that you reference that only a really sophisticated historian would ever guess. Like, can you name like one or two artists that hardly anyone ever deciphers?
Sure. There's Andre Lotte. He was an expressionist painter. For some reason, he didn't get that much attention, but I think he's amazing. Also, Hendrik Goltzius, a contemporary of Rubens, but I think Rubens really wins in the being more recognizable. Also just a Dutch Renaissance painter, but I think his works have a little bit more grit to them.
Mm-hmm. Now you don't appropriate you appropriate from men, but you're influenced by women,
right?
Because I know you're referencing Cindy Sherman a lot.
Mm-hmm. Right. Just
what about someone like Lisa Yuskavage? I'm sure too, right? Lisa Yuskavage,
yes.
Cindy Sherman, Cecily Brown.
Yeah, Cecily Brown too, of course, with her really expressive mark making. Any
other artists female artists that speak to you?
Well, so I've started incorporating rhinestones into the paintings, and I feel like I'm kind of in a dialogue with Micheline Thomas. I really love the way that she depicts her figures, and I think she's pulling a lot from art history as well.
Mm-hmm. Are there other questions?
Let's see. Rex asks, Mira, can you make a puzzle of Allison's mural for sale in the museum?
Oh, wow, that would be so cool. I would love to make a puzzle. And yeah, people love to hang, because the restaurant is situated where the loading bays, our museum now is a series on one level, 100,000 square foot campus. And where this restaurant and entrance was the concrete jungle of the loading bays. So people now, our director, Juan Valadez, who's been with us 22 years, he loves to spend his weekends in the Everglades. And for 6 months, he was tagging trees in the various nurseries to connect the trees with the butterflies that would eventually come and the birds that would be attracted. So within 24 hours that we planted this incredible Everglades paradise, within 24 hours, we had birds and butterflies. But so people just love it. So the restaurant is actually indoor, outdoors, and this garden is part of it. Well, people just love to sit there for hours. They order a bottle of wine and they just sit there. They'll sit there for 3 hours, having a leisurely lunch and sit. How fabulous would it be for them to then, do one of your puzzles? I think that's a great idea. Are you a puzzle maker?
Well,
if anyone's listening who does puzzles, I think your work would be like the perfect work for puzzle making, because not only because it would be like, and also on a certain level for kids, because it could be like a art history lesson whilst making puzzle, while putting together a puzzle. That's a great idea. I love that.
I do too. I do too.
I was also thinking that we also have those metal sculptures. I was thinking we should just, on a beautiful day, we should just put them into the garden, because I think people would love to pose with them, because again, the women, now you depict the women are so powerful in these sculptures, and they're bigger than life. And I can see people really wanting to have a portrait with them. I think we should do, we should do a garden sculpture, photo up session. That would be so cool.
Yeah.
And I wouldn't want to leave, I think the sun, they couldn't take the weathering, but I think for an afternoon with Allison in the garden, sculptures could be really fun.
The sculpture garden.
Yeah.
The sculpture.
It would be a paradise found.
Right.
What did you go? Strangers in Paradise. It's only fitting that these sculptures would end up in this new Everglades sculpture, Everglades garden paradise.
Mm-hmm. And there is so much like lush imagery in the sculptures, so like trees, leaves, palms. So
well, the birds singing. I mean, I thought, how do birds find a place within 24 hours? Well, Juan said, look, they're looking for food in each one of these trees. This is like we open a restaurant for people, and my garden is a restaurant for all the birds that are coming from north to south and south to north. And he says, some of these birds have traveled 3,000 miles to get to our garden. But how do they find something that was a concrete jungle just, 24 hours ago, and now they're here? And I would sit there listening to these birds, like being so happy in this garden, and it's quite lovely. It's really wonderful. I hope, it was nice. It's nice that you got to taste the food. We have a young, beautiful, ambitious chef. A chef who studied in the Basque Country in 3-star restaurants, and he's just, just like, it's just beautiful that how creative he is, and how much people are enjoying it. So your beautiful art is kind of adding to the joy that people feel that they can, even in this time of COVID, people are coming with their own group. Their husband, their children, tables are far apart, and people are able to have a little bit of freedom and a little joy eating outside. And it feels so uplifting to finally to in this small place feel like there's a certain kind of freedom to just relax, because people have been isolated and scared. It's been a tough year between all the racial the injustices, racial injustices in this country, on top of the COVID. It's been just a tough year, and anyway, we hope that our museum is somewhat of a sanctuary to have a little bit of relief from that.
Mm-hmm. It definitely feels like a very inspiring and safe space to be in. So I think that's we're out of time. It went by very quickly.
I want to thank Jill. Jill, I so appreciate what the Lowe Museum does. I love being part of their, we have a reading group that the Lowe hosts, and I've so much enjoyed it. Of course, I enjoy it more in person. I'm much more, for me, the social interaction is far more meaningful than this digital, but it makes it even it's nice, because I know the women from all the times that we met in person. So it's at least we're able to continue, and I really appreciate that. Thank you. Thank you for bringing us together. Allison, I enjoyed this conversation. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
I want to thank both of you, both Mrs. Rubell and Allison Zuckerman, for being so open and gracious and letting us sort of listen to your fabulous conversation and hearing about your really special relationship and obviously shared passion for art and art history.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
So thank you very much, everyone.
Right. Good night.
Have a good
Good night.
night.
Good night.
Thank you so
Good
much.
night.